Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name's Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we're going to be talking about episode 33, which is called Spirituality of Relevance Realization: Wonder, Awe, Mystery, Sacredness. So, to get us started, as I always do, I'm going to pass it over to Lizelle for a quote.
Hello, world. Um, yes, I'm going to start with the divine Plato, as Plotinus likes to call him, talking of sacredness. I'm doing a course with Johannes Niederhauser with the Halcyon Academy on Plato's Republic, or Politeia, he calls it. It's really amazing. If you want to go deeper into philosophy, I deeply recommend Johannes's Halcyon Academy. Uh, he throws in Greek terms like, that's just normal. So I love it. We're reading this week. We are reading book 4. So I'm going to read some things from book 4 that jumped out of me. 2 different passages, but small. The first is just this thing, good counsel, which I think is important to both of us. A very short sentence on good counsel. This very thing, good counsel, is plainly a kind of knowledge. For it's surely not by lack of learning, but by knowledge, that people counsel well. Hence the importance of learning. And then, close to the end of the book 4, he returns to justice, which is what the book is about. Justice, Johannes says, should rather be translated as appropriateness. And it makes sense if you read the Republic. It makes a lot of sense. But in truth, justice was, as it seems, something of this sort. However, not with respect to a man's minding his external business, but with respect to what is within, with respect to what truly concerns him and his own. He doesn't let each part in him mind other people's business, or the three classes in the soul meddle with each other, but really sets his own house in good order and rules himself. He cleans his own room, in other words. He arranges himself, becomes his own friend, and harmonizes the three parts, exactly like 3 notes in a harmonic scale: lowest, highest, and middle. And if there are some other parts in between, he binds them together and become entirely one from many, moderate and harmonized. Then, and only then, he acts, if he does act in some way, either concerning the acquisition of money, or the care of the body, or something political, or concerning private contracts. In all these actions, he believes and names a just and fine action, one that preserves and helps to produce this condition. And wisdom, the knowledge that supervises this action. Thus far, our scripture reading.
Yeah, we actually were talking something about that before we started recording too. Um, towards the end, I started to like sense into how attuning yourself towards these good things is impacting every aspect of your life. So in that way, I mean, a lot of this episode is staging how what the results of relevance realization are. Like we go a lot into results, like things that come out of this ability that we have to realize what is relevant. So anyway, I think in that what I was hearing was that you if what is relevant to you is what is good, that's going to be a part of every single thing that you do.
Mm.
What did you get from it, or where were you going with it?
It was just the highlighted parts in the book I read this week.
How we find relevance.
I am a creature of time and place. You can't always be busy with eternal.
All right. Well, this is a topic that we really, really enjoy, something that we often talk about, the sacred spirituality. And so, one of the first things that I have written, because I know he went through a summary, um, was I think one of the kind of main points that I captured from his summary was that it requires us to use energy when we commit to something we care about. Like after we decide, or after it is decided, what it is that we are caring about, however that works, there's metabolic energy that's being used. So that relates us back with that robot. Like what is the thing, we're getting energy, we're autopoietic, and we constantly need to be, getting things for ourselves. So energy, basically. And so it's like, but it takes energy to get energy. And so what are you going to expend your energy on? Kind of where I'm getting at.
It's cool that you summarize it in this way because it very much relates to the stupid joke that I just made about me being a creature of time and place, because that is exactly it. We we are limited. We are also finite creatures. And I say also because we're also something else. But we are also finite creatures, and our finite being has limited resources, limited energy, and hence we can't, you know, do everything and be everything and see everything and notice everything, pay attention to everything. Hence, relevance realization. Somehow we zoom into that which is relevant. And we have to because we are finite creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the energy, like we are our limited resources. That's what you're getting at.
Yeah. It gives us a I forget what he says, but a kind of like an underlying reason for human spirituality. It's like, why is it that because he's going to be relating, not equating human spirituality with things like relevance realization or just like how those work together. And we've done a lot to see what feeds into relevance realization. We're going to get to this lovely diagram behind you.
Yes.
Okay. And so from the diagram that's behind you, we've been feeding a lot in on that side where it's got general intelligence, working memory, inference, like the things that feed into relevance realization. And even last episode, we kind of got into what's right above your head, which is the small world networks and self organizing criticality. And so all of that has been kind of like related to relevance realization. And this episode, he's kind of getting into what we get out of it, from what I understand.
Mm. So the way I understand it, that's why at the top you can't really see it, and I don't know if I will
Yeah,
be able to make
perfect.
you see it. It's written uh, a naturalistic explanation of relevance realization. Remember, quite a number of episodes ago, he was talking us about what is a good scientific theory, and
Mm-hmm.
he had this diagram of there needs to be a lot of things feeding into the theory, what it is about. And everything on this side is the convergence part. It's the things that feed into. And it's I think it's one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. Nine things, nine different fields of study or things that have been studied and the conclusions that come from them feeds into this theory of relevance realization. So the convergence is pretty high, and high convergence means that it is high in plausibility and trustworthiness. So this whole diagram is basically John trying to tell us I have a good theory of relevance realization, because look at all the high um, convergence. Remember the distinction he makes between relevance and relevance realization. We cannot have a theory of relevance. We can have a theory of relevance realization. On this side, if you look at what a good scientific theory is the elegance part, meaning what flows from it and what is the power of the theory.
Mm.
What is it apt for, usable for? So a multi-aptness means that it is a good theory, flows from this theory of relevance realization. And then, but I think I'm going to quite jump. Like all of these 8 things, he says, you can term so that he doesn't have to flail his arms around
Right.
like I do in a somewhat ordered structure or something like that, comes to religio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's what
Yeah.
that part is about. And I only actually started taking notes. And he says this episode is about the phenomenology of relevance realization in terms of meaning making or spirituality. Hence this side, indeed. How does relevance realization feed into our spirituality or meaning making? I only started really taking notes from where he mentioned um, fundamental framing of reality, because that's where he started talking about new things, as far as I could tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm going to keep this on my board for quite some time.
Um, okay. All right. Yes. So that thing, what did you say again? Up at the top, it says about it's a naturalistic explanation.
A naturalistic explanation of relevance realization, yes, because John sees himself as a naturalistic philosopher, I think. He sees himself as a naturalistic something. So I think it's a naturalistic philosopher. I'm not
Okay.
quite
Okay.
sure what the something is, but he
Gotcha.
sees his view as naturalistic. So that's why he wants to give a naturalistic explanation of relevance realization.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to, if you have high convergence and high elegance, it means your argument is fluent or it's high in fluency as well. That's the one thing that but
Okay.
coming back to a previous episode.
I'm going to throw in another one preconceptual. He kept saying that
Okay.
relevance realization is preconceptual. This was really interesting. Relevance relevance realization is taking place at a fundamentally deeper level than the level of belief. Because I mean, even in the last episode, I was like getting kind of freaked out that we were talking about God, and then in this episode, he's like, "I just want to say, relevance realization is not God. That'd be ridiculous." He specifically said that. So, um, what's being said here is you don't decide what you believe and then go out and believe it. There is something primordial. That was another word he kept using. Preconceptual,
Mhm,
primordial, like these pre-propositional.
mhm. So
Yeah.
all these pre's refer to this fundamental framing. It's our fundamental framing. I'm just going to run through all the pre's and then we talk
Yeah.
about
Okay.
it.
Let's do the
So
pre's.
it's pre-conceptual, pre-propositional, pre-inferential, pre-communication, pre-experiential, pre-egoic, and pre-normative. Those are all the pre's, and then we can go much deeper into each of them because it's pretty interesting. Preconceptual is the first one.
Preconceptual. In order to have concepts, you have to categorize. But before you can even
Mm.
categorize, you have to have a demonstrative reference.
Yeah, and all of this he gets from the other side. That it flows in, flows out. That's good argument, in other words, good
Mhm.
theory. And he gets it from this categorization part.
This relevance realization is basically what it takes to form categories in the first place. You
Mm,
can't say that categories exist without ever having relevance realization for those
yeah.
categories.
So even before you frame conceptions, you have this framing.
And then what's the next one?
Pre-propositional is the one I have. And that's all I have there. But it makes sense. Before we then utter or put into words or ideas these conceptions, it's almost the same, you know,
He said beliefs, I think, in this
yeah,
one.
beliefs. Yeah,
Beliefs, your assertions.
yeah.
Okay.
And he talked about, and we've talked about this a lot, how faith is often belief based. People say, like, a confession of faith, I believe this, I believe that, I believe this. Well, that's not actually, like, he's saying, like, you know, that maybe is not the deepest place you can go to. That's,
Right.
I think that's what I heard. So what I wrote here in the type of brackets that indicated my own idea is like relevance, realization, and calling. Because this was just like this episode now that I've watched it after all that the coven has been through and you and me have been through, just like everything just like I think that's also why I feel so energized today, besides what I already told you about. It's just like it just feels like everything is falling into place with this episode for me. And it feels like I haven't heard John speak on the idea of calling and relevance realization and how it relates to each other. But
Mm,
I feel like it must deeply relate to each other, right? It's
yeah.
like this calling because we don't know
Yeah.
what is calling. We don't really know to what it's calling us. We just feel a need to move, to turn our orientation into a certain direction and move
Mhm.
in that direction.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's some sort of deep relevance realization taking place there.
Yeah.
And I have heard John recently speak of this next the next series that he's going to do as it's his calling. So he is busy with this whole idea of calling,
Yeah.
and it just feels like, oh my god, it's relevance realization. That's what is happening to me when I feel the strong
Yeah.
urge to move towards a certain direction, or
Mhm.
me watching the Awakening series 3 times. It's a sense of calling, it's a sense of relevance realization.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So that's propositional faith in my mind,
Mhm.
because I don't know why or what or
Right.
even
Yeah.
how, but I know that way.
Yeah. It reminds me of I have the kids working on a project about monarch butterflies. And did you know that monarch butterflies, the way that they work is generational, where one population or one generation will lay eggs in Mexico, and those will hatch and fly to southeastern United States or west. They go two different directions, but they're trying to make it to Canada, and it takes several generations to get there. And somehow, that last generation that gets to Canada, they have to get back to Mexico. They're the super generation. These butterflies that were not born in Mexico, never seen Mexico, make it to Mexico. How? And for the longest time, they didn't even know where they were going. For the longest time, they didn't even know they were going to Mexico. So yeah, it was
Oh, it's amazing.
their sense of direction. It's already incredible because it's like something to do with magnetism, perhaps.
Yeah,
That's sometimes that's what birds it is. But then like, but you weren't even born there. You don't even
yeah.
have the map. How on earth do you get back? So there is something. Um,
Oh my
yeah.
god, this is very, very, very rich symbolically. When we get to the whole idea of home and
Yes.
homing
Yeah. I got chills.
and being called towards something that we've never been there. We weren't born there,
Mm-mm.
but previous generations,
And it feels like home once
and
you
it
get
feels
there.
like home.
Yeah. So that's how you know. I don't know.
Oh
Woo! I
no.
imagine we'll get a lot of those little shivers throughout this episode. So let's move to the next one. Lots of moments of aporia in this one.
Pre-inferential. I have nothing written with it and I can't remember anything.
I didn't even write it down. Okay, next.
Okay. Pre-communication.
Anything?
Yes. There he said, like, yeah, you think it has to be communicated because you think you learn what is relevant from people, but you don't, because before your mom tells you triangle, you know, no, bottle, because bottle is more
Right.
relevant to like, but I just couldn't help myself. Before your mom tells you bottle, you pay attention to your mom. You know someone somehow intuitively you know your mom is relevant, and the thing in her hand is relevant. So it's this pre-communication.
Mhm.
You paying attention to the speaker presupposes relevance realization.
Yeah. Yeah. That's relevant. I should listen to it.
Yeah.
That yeah, yeah. Thinking in baby, baby language. That's relevant. I should pay attention to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. And um how about the next one?
Sorry, I just had to laugh at myself because something in me. realized that this Awakening series is very relevant, and that's why I'm paying attention. But I'm a little slow, so I have to pay a lot of attention before I get
Me too.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's still like I want to play with that one about the like I don't know something that Rebecca said she's experienced with ritual too is that people it's almost like you're in a you both are involved and there's like some sort of magnetism there too around the ritual. It's the same with me in astrology where like it'll seem like people are coming for the same transits or something like that. There's like something and this is all my own, what I'm bringing to this episode that like very esoteric side. I guess it can see that I'm okay. Thanks, man. Is that God? Yeah, anyway, that it was kind of I don't even know where I was fucking what I was saying 'cause God liked
Esoteric,
it.
the word that God was like, "Yo, go, Sarah."
I'm turning that setting off. He will not interfere with my thoughts
No.
again.
No, it's funny. It's funny. You should allow God entrance into.
I do, but
Uh,
not during the awakening practice. Let's talk about this when I'm by myself.
you were
Okay.
talking about
Oh,
how the clients and the same for Jungian therapy. So I'll just say it in that term. The client and the therapist usually find themselves oddly in the same transition, and that was what you were talking about.
yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's because that happens before you can really communicate it too. And I'm not saying that, you know, because we're finding patterns. So it's all building out as we're building. So I don't mean to bring a lot of meaning to that. It's meaningful for me.
I'm still on the previous one. I'm so sorry. I'm like my whole body is giggling, so it's really difficult for me to stop.
That was hilarious. Okay. So that's cool.
But how it relates to this? How do you think it relates to this?
You were talking about pre-communication, and if I see a
Mhm,
client, I've never seen them before in my life. I don't know who they are, and sometimes they don't even tell me what they're coming to the reading for. And so, before we've even communicated to one another something, I can find in their chart what's relevant. I can look at certain aspects in their chart, and before they've even told me anything that they're going through in their life, I can say, "Hey, I see something. I see something's being activated in your fourth house. Are you
mhm,
moving, or is what's going on with your mom? Like things like that." And
mhm,
and then that helps them to search in their search space for what is relevant based on what I just brought up as a pattern for them
mhm.
to. So I call them at this point now relevance readings because what I'm doing is showing them what's relevant. I'm not giving people life purpose. I'm not telling them who their, partner is going to be, where they can find them, because some astrologers do that and they can do that. I don't do that and I can't do that. What I can see in a chart is where someone's attention might already be, and I can bring up for them the things in that space to search for through their own personal history, through feelings, through their body, sitting with gene keys, sitting with hexagrams, sitting with tarot cards. Like I can before they've even told me. So it felt like there was something in their pre-communication, but I don't know that that's even related to this. Like I said, that's me bringing my esoteric thing to it. So
But there is definitely something here. I'm not exactly sure if it relates to this, but it might be in all of them. You know, it might be in the pre-experiential, it might be in the pre-egoic, it might be in the pre-normative, it might be in all of them. But there's definitely something here, and yeah, I love that you're calling it relevance readings. It's that's what you call it, right? Relevance
mhm.
readings.
Yeah. It kind of came, I mean, right there by your left shoulder, my right, it was like, oh, that's what it is, Sarah. It's not the astrology. It's not um the faith practice, the religio, it's the binding, it's the relating.
Yes.
That's bringing out relevance. It's like, oh, we're relating.
It's pretty cool. Something about John that he said, like, people are not going to know how to interact with general artificial intelligence because we have forgotten how to interact with the gods. And then the artificial intelligence giving you a thumbs up. Then that means it relates to all of this side because religio relates to all of this side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. These honestly, like I said, I was editing 32 and it's a lot of fun to edit these, even though we started like in the weeds of CogSci and I didn't want anything to do with these episodes. Now it's getting fun. So I think that's something to mention. It levels off. It doesn't feel so bad, but you have to go through 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. And then I think 32 is when it kind of like, oh, okay, now we kind of get it. But even in 31, you and I said something to the effect of, okay, I think it's starting to level out. I think that that's
Um,
starting to now feel better. 32 was when we were like, we're on solid ground. All right, let's get back into it. We were at, I think, pre experiential.
yes. And that is all I wrote, pre experiential.
So this
And then
one,
he just says it doesn't mean in a previous lifetime, which I was like, okay.
uh-huh, yeah. Hmm. Depends on how you
Well, let's
define that.
agree to disagree.
Yes, exactly. He says with pre experiential that obviousness is a result of it. This was when I started to really focus in on, he started saying results. He's like, this is the result. And I was like, that's interesting to put it in those terms.
Hmm.
He says, obviousness is a result of it, per Mark Mulvey. He's got wonderful notes on his Medium. So I highly recommend
Okay.
anybody go back through his too. This was like key and super helpful for me. So he kind of just like took quotes from John in the episodes and really distilled them down. And so for the pre experiential one, he says, in your meaningfully structured experience, your level of common sense, obviousness, is a result of it. That world of obvious understanding is generated out of relevance realization being coupled with the environment.
So basically, what I hear is even before you experience something, when you are confronted with that experience, you kind of know how to deal with it because
Yeah.
it's obvious to you how it's obvious to you now that the example he sometimes uses, it's obvious to you how far you should stand away from someone,
Mm-hmm.
which some people don't have, and that freaks me
Right.
out. But that type of maybe obviousness he speaks about. Even before you have gone through the experience, you know how to deal with the experience,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't make sense because we learn through experience.
Right. Don't
But
we?
yet,
Whose experience? Okay.
the previous butterflies.
Yes. Yes. Okay. It's also pre egoic. And did you write anything in addition on that one?
Yes, I wrote see agent arena. And
Mm.
then with agent arena, I wrote narratively structured reliably acting ego. So the agent arena thing is something to do about me having a narrative and an acting ego in that narrative, which I think this is really interesting as well. Jordan Peterson will do well to really study this episode because the conversation that John and Jordan often have is about this. Jordan thinking narrative is one of the most fundamental things to being, something like that.
Mm.
And John keeps saying, no, there's something more fundamental. So this
Mm.
is what triggered for me, like, and this is what John means. Like the agent arena is a place where the narrative pops up, but there's something even more fundamental to this
Yeah.
interaction or something like that. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's about that rang in my head.
Well, what I heard when you said that was the word, because that's what the narrative is. So Jordan's affiliation and faith in Christianity, where John has that Buddhist background, and what he references is something more of that. Well, how is it that I'm relating and the
Mhm.
practices that I'm doing? And yeah, I am the all, the one. Yeah, that Gnostic.
Mhm.
I don't know that Buddhist
Mhm.
is Gnostic, but it just kind of it reminds me of that kind of idea of the one in the all and the all in the one.
Mhm. There's, I can see a Gnostic element in Buddhism. I mean, the whole idea that uh, everything is Maya, everything is an
Mm.
illusion,
Mm-hmm,
type of thing.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um,
So, in short, agent and arena emerge from relevance realization.
yes.
And it's also pre-normative. Oh, he said he's going to get in trouble for this one. So the quote is, before you can assess truth, things have to be meaningful to you. Before you can assess beauty, they have to be expectualized for you. Before you can assess goodness, you have to have agency and arena. This makes possible your normative judgments as to what's true, what is good, and what is beautiful.
I only wrote the truth part because truth, but
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
He, I have this written down too. It doesn't mean reducible, but that relevance realization is primordial to them. So these
Mhm.
things aren't all relevance realization, but relevance realization is primordial to all of these things. They all
Mhm.
require a pre, I don't know, the earlier condition. They all require that beforehand relevance was realized.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Heidegger's primordiality he refers to here. So there's a ground that's deeper than conception, proposition, inference, communication, experience, ego, and norms. That's basically what it means.
Now let's put the right side together. You were doing that earlier. You've already got it down there, but we're going to do it. Notice how much of this points to aspects of human spirituality, all of these things on the right side. It is a fundamental grounding of your being and your being connected. He argues that your being and your being connected are one and the same.
Hmm.
Because I am arguing that those are the same. I wrote it down verbatim. That's exactly what he says.
Being and being connected is the same.
Your
That
being and your
is,
being connected is the same. Then that calls into question what you're connected to, right?
yeah.
That word connection is really important. No, what's
Yeah.
going on over there?
Well, there's actualized connectedness and there's potential connectedness. And I think when we think of connectedness, we often think of the actualized connectedness.
Mhm.
But I know I'm connected to being, capital B, and beings that I don't have a actualized connection to.
Mhm. But do
Yeah.
you and you just don't bring it to the awareness, like I was saying with, or even you're saying with like Jungian psychology, like you do actually, but it's not being brought to the forefront because it's not important.
Then that is it. Then what happens in those things? Potential connectedness are being actualized or realized. So, and that's why it's in religio. It is
Mhm.
there. It's just being realized. So then these encounters are realizations of religio.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, wow. Okay, let's define religio really quick because we've been talking a
Okay.
lot about it. Okay,
All right.
because it means to connect. It literally means to bind. Go ahead.
No,
Okay.
I think the exact words which he said, and it is important for the coven that I state the exact words, to bind together.
I actually wrote that's what Rebecca's name meant. So one of the things that he says that we're binding is the pre-egoic, post-egoic binding that simultaneously grounds the self and its world,
Yeah.
which kind of like to me sounds like who you are before it binds who you were and who you are into now, into the
Yeah.
world. but I'm also just extrapolating.
The actualized connection is egoic. The
Mm,
pre-egoic and maybe even the post-egoic is potential
mm,
or something beyond
yeah.
potential and actualization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Interesting. The egoic.
Yeah. But I mean, it brings us back to what I think you said before we started recording. We are human beings. We are egos.
Hmm.
We are to experience this life as Lizelle, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so there's nothing bad about egoic, but there's something so beautiful about pre and post egoic.
Hmm. Yeah. This is
Yeah.
interesting because this kind of makes me feel like it's been somewhat of like a malpractice to tell people to lose the ego
Yeah. I,
because
yeah.
actually the only way that you can connect is to recognize the ego.
Yeah.
And I know that that's like there's this is the two extremes. Like either you're worthless, you've come here and all you do is sin and you're just terrible and, repent. Or the opposite is, hey, you're God. You don't even got to be down here. It's like, don't
Mm.
even worry about food. Don't worry about water. If you die, you die, whatever.
And I think also it's terribly dangerous to tell people to let go of the ego, because the ego is helping you survive. it, I I think of it as a rosebud, the ego. And the opening of the rosebud is something that happens naturally. So the ego can develop into the self quite naturally if you let it. But if you try to force a rosebud open, you ruin it.
Mm,
My mom, one time when I visited, it was just before rose season, and we we are from the line of the rose. She's Rose, Mary Magdalene Rose.
mm,
So she plucked a rosebud, which was she's like, well, it will open, you know, in its vase, but it didn't. And I cried. I sat with a rosebud and cried because it was so sad. And that's what happens, I think, to many people when they encounter the other side of spirituality. You know, that like, oh, you have to let go of your ego when they're too young
yep.
and when they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
So this
Oh,
is the book
sure.
that he refers to. I didn't read the whole book.
Okay.
I did read because the book is essays. It's 11 essays on the joy of secularism.
Okay.
And there's only one of the essays that he refers to. So he reads from the book, but
Okay.
from this particular essay only.
Gotcha.
The Sacred Wonder by Paulo Casto. And these starts, these first heading is At Home in the World? Question mark. So that's cute.
Hmm. Do you want to go into any quotes or anything from that one?
I'm going to end with a quote from this.
Okay, cool. Okay, then he says the metaphor of the atmosphere suggests not only the image of a global container, but also that of a rhythm of breathing and a light of refraction to which a living being must attune or adjust herself. And the fact that this guy was commenting on secularism is something that he was also talking about. It sounded so
Mhm,
poetic and profound. And I don't
mhm,
mean to say that people that are secular or a secular, society isn't profound and amazing and beautiful, but it doesn't tend to lean into that
mhm,
romantic, right? It tends to lean into the logic and the science. And maybe we can have awe and wonder of those things, but there's a way to explain it away.
mhm,
And this guy seemed really perplexed in what John was reading by him. He's just like, yeah, um, trying to describe this thing that you can't actually focus on
mhm,
and
mhm,
look at. So therefore you can't even measure it because if you can't look at it, then you can't measure it. So there's this like paradox that he's writing about, I think.
mhm. Well, it is an amazing essay, and it starts with like the negative side. You know, like how people see life as like a curse because we've been disenchanted. But the disenchantment he starts with the Greeks and how they viewed life as a curse. So it's not a recent thing.
Okay.
But again, John talks later about the whole Greek domicile. So
Mhm.
maybe it has something to do with that. Um, yeah. So he starts also talking about that side of the coin. But then he talks about how one could live in this atmosphere of wonder. And this other book that he referenced, amazing book. I really loved reading. This is one of the books that is really fun to read or good to read. Good to read is better than fun to read. It's it's a good read for sure. It's I'm gonna read it again sometime. Human emotion behind the search for the divine. And I mean, we are different inclined towards different. He writes about moods. Um, we are different in our dispositions,
Mhm.
and so some people are more dispositioned or predispositioned to the positive moods, uh, which will make them probably more likely to focus on the wonderful aspects of being, and some are not. They're more, melancholic in nature, and that is then how they will view the world. And then this atmosphere that he describes that we could live in is this mood almost of wonder.
It's because there was a lot in that too, where there there was this mention of it creating special conditions of life where the crucial distinctions between inside and outside are drawn. And I thought that was like, I don't know, there's something there, that's the differentiation. That's where the whole becomes separate things, is that those special conditions are creating I don't even know how to word this, like what I'm thinking. Because he was like talking about the atmosphere and how, like, well, Earth is separate from space because it's got that atmosphere that protects it from space debris and forms it into something. But he's like, but the Earth isn't, it didn't create the atmosphere. It is in it, it's part of it.
Well, strictly speaking, the Earth did create the atmosphere, didn't it? Wasn't it all the oxygen making animals like long, long time ago, or organisms that created the atmosphere?
Did they come from here? We don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's definitely true. Yeah. But mm,
But in this autopoietic way, in like
yeah.
the self-evolving way, it was created. So it's, yeah.
Mm. I don't know. I think yeah, probably just breaking my brain on something it doesn't need to spend so much time on. I think kind of the thing that I really wanted to emphasize from that part was that distinction between what is inside and what is outside, because then that's going to inform a lot of things about our interactions with the sacred. I don't know. I'm like really fixed on this aspect of the sacred, that it is separate. It is something that I am coming into contact with. Like I am in relationship with it. And so for some reason that just like is emphasized in my notes. So I don't know. Not a focal state, but non-focal state was interesting too. Like the way that you engage with the sacred is in a non-focal state. It's not by focusing on it. Is that what he was saying?
Well, it is funny because I see the sacred different. I
Mm-hmm.
see it as something inside.
Mm.
And um, so I'm going to read the quote he reads there. The experience of having a world, and that is like hyphenated, so it's one word, having a world. Writes it as
Yeah, he said
one
that was like
word.
Heidegger, right?
Yeah, it's very Heidegger. It's Heidegger writes like that all the time. Has its roots not in a head-on and focused relationship with a clear-cut object, So that is then not objecting. But in the emergence of the bubble of significance, that for a sentient being plays the same role that is played by the atmosphere with regard to the earth. It creates, that is, special conditions of life where existentially crucial distinctions between inside and outside are drawn. But we live and breathe and have our being, to quote a quote that John quotes, in the atmosphere, in the sacred, in other words. So we are on the inside. It's not inside us, we are inside it, type of thing.
Yeah, we're inside the bubble of the sacred.
Something like that. But I don't know what the outside is then.
Yeah, exactly. What's out there? He also, let's see, was anything else on this atmospheric thing? He mentioned St. Paul.
That's a quote from St. Paul that I just made.
So that's where you're saying we are in the sacred. We are actually,
Yeah.
as the earth is in the atmosphere, we are in the sacred.
In the Bible, for me, it's weird to say St. Paul because I'm a Calvinist. Sorry, Paul writes uh, writes in God we live and move and have our being. And Paul actually quotes someone else, and I can't remember who he's quoting, but he's quoting someone else. So that is the quote that John here brings up. And this is then where he said, I'm not saying relevant realization is God. But when he said that, I was thinking, no, you're not saying relevance realization is God. But are you saying that relevance is God? Relevance can't be studied
Right.
scientifically.
I think that was what was like, that is what I was thinking last time and was thinking that it was relevance realization. But I think you're hitting on something. We won't say that anybody's claiming that, but let's talk about Fuller. Can we talk about Fuller now? You talked about Fuller. You already showed us his book. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was
And
amazing book, amazing book.
so he's saying that wonder is responsible for some of the deepest experience of religio.
Yes, that's what this whole book is about.
Yeah. The underlying function
Mm.
of wonder. And you said emotion to, or he said emotion to spirituality, but you didn't mention that emotions as well. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. Both of these books speak of. He speaks very much in detail about emotion and the study of emotion, currently and in the past, which was very interesting. Um, and how wonder used to be one of the emotions that's like identified as an emotion, not anymore. Um, yeah, but yeah, he sees it, of course, as one of the emotions, the primal emotions. But it's a really, and then he speaks of three different people who had a life shaped by wonder, and William James is one of the people.
What?
And I'm reading. He's a scientist. I
Okay.
can grab his book, but then I'll have to. Should I?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know
Okay.
him.
So William James, he's a psychologist, which was one of the biggest American psychologists
Yeah.
of his day, and a very foundational character in psychology. I didn't know his life story until I read this wonder book. Um, his dad was a mystic almost. William Blake,
Yeah.
type of people, and I
Okay.
think they interacted with the same type of people, and um, I forget. They were. So his dad exposed him to the mystical side of life, but he himself wanted to be a scientist, and
Mm.
hence he came into um, psychology. He studied medicine. Um, and Swedenborg's metaphysical system was also, I think, someone who influenced William Blake, but I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. But yeah, and yeah, so William James was born, And then, especially, he refers a lot to this book, The Varieties of the Religious Experience,
Mm-hmm.
which coincidentally is on my to read list while Rebecca is away, because it's one of the books that I got in Glastonbury.
Mm,
So,
imagine that.
yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, but it's amazing. It's a really fun, and it's a one of those relatively thin books.
Mm-hmm.
John have there are thinner books, but this one has 150 pages.
Not too long of reading about wonder.
Yeah.
Wondering about wonder.
Every time the word wonder comes up, I'm thinking, the wonder of you.
The wonder of you.
Yeah, that's definitely a deepity. So yeah.
So then let's see. I have a couple of things about wonder versus curiosity, and we're going back to gestalt and features, being and having, opening up and focal. So, and we were just talking about how like the sacred isn't something that you can focus on to be in relationship with. What would you say is kind of the main point that Fuller says wonder is serving? Like, what is the main purpose for wonder?
I wasn't prepared for that question, but one of his arguments, because he is also evolutionary psychologist, and one of his arguments is that wonder does actually have an evolutionary benefit, but not for the individual,
Mm.
rather for the whole,
Mm-hmm.
because wonder often leaves us in states of stupefaction, so it's not the safest place to be for the individual. But yeah, I think that's the main like there is. And then what I'm thinking from that is what is not necessarily beneficial to the individual, but to the whole. It's religion, but then religion and not religio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because John also mentions in this, like being part of a religious community, okay, that being part
Being part.
helps you live longer. But I'm not sure. Religion, I think, is founded in wonder,
Mm-hmm.
and then it turns into tradition. And being part of the tradition is good for the individual. But
Right.
I'm not sure that the ones who experience the wonder has the best of it. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of sacrifice, I think, in the beginning. And yeah, so but it's good for the whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
the
it does
whole.
have evolutionary purpose.
Right. And okay, here's something to just insert is that everybody wants to be part of something bigger when we transcend ourselves. And so, yeah, wonder leads you there. Wonder leads you to that space where you can be a part of something bigger than yourself, where you can transcend the self.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and he also says wonder helps you to remember and put you in touch with religio, that word behind
Mhm.
you. So that is in itself, yeah, binding, connecting, participatory.
Mhm.
Okay. Did you understand what he was saying when he was talking about how awe is moving you to opening and wonder helps you remember and put you in touch with religio? Is that what? Because I felt like I honestly thought he was going to go for a this gives you this and this gives you this, but it didn't ever break out into that from what I could tell.
It's the problem solving having mode part of me, the curiosity part of me, breaks it into features. And everything I
Yes.
now just said is on the curiosity side. The curiosity, the features, it's the having mode, which is
Yep.
important because we need it for problem solving. On the other side, he didn't go too deep into curiosity. On the other side, we have wonder, which is the being mode, which we experience in the being mode, or it helps to induce the being mode in us. The feeling of awe, opening up to the whole, um, remembering the being mode. Remember, for him, sati, he interprets it as remembering the being mode. That's how he
Mm-hmm.
sees sati and remembering. Confronting a mystery. accommodation. That accommodation is self-transformation in the sense as how I am transformed in order to come to know that which is a wonder or a mystery or inspires awe in me. So that knowing by being transformed into the image of the quote from Plotinus that I love and read so often. That is how wonder brings about self-transformation.
And so, like, immediately I thought about, we've talked about purification, especially recently with St. Bridget's Day. And so because we also, like, there's this, you even mentioned it, this kind of negative connotation with purification, where you have to get rid of the bad, all the things that are not worthy shouldn't be here. And this accommodating thing kind of, puts it in perspective to me that I'm transformed to be in contact with the sacred. It doesn't necessarily mean that I can always embody the sacred, but that in order to approach and be in relationship with the sacred, then making accommodations like abstaining from certain things, or that kind of stuff, is helping me to transform and to be in relationship with the most pure. Can definitely be used in a if you're, all right, religion, for example, if you're telling people they have to be pure, if you're forcing others to purify in order to be in front of the Lord, that's where that's wrong. You can't do it to other people. You recognize the purity in you to be in relationship. And so that's, okay, well, let's say, based on my faith, that saints maybe are closer in that purification. They are closer to being purified, or they are in a more purified state than me or somebody like me. So anyway, but it doesn't mean that I'm bad. It's not like, oh, she's the scum. It doesn't lower me in my I don't know, self-awareness. Like, I don't feel subordinate to in that relationship. I just see it as that is an unattainable state to be in, but as much as I can visit with it, then I can visit with what is pure by becoming it.
Mm. Well, I want to mention then again what I told you before we recorded, that I think purification and what is pure needs to be redefined. We need to revisit that because the traditional religions have tainted it towards the self-loathing part of what you mentioned earlier, that I said, no, both of those are egoic ways to relate to the sacred. And then that makes me jump ahead something towards the sacred. And what is the sacred? And I'm not going to say much of it now, but he refers to Otto's book, Das Heilige, and in German, the holy. It's just the holy. The numinous. Yeah. What is that? And maybe the sacred needs to be redefined so that it's not this anti-human, anti-flesh thing. I thought it was so beautiful what Martin and Ryan helped me to discover in the purification as not ridding myself of the bad, but drawing out the good. And this being transformed towards, to the sacred, I want to see it more as drawing out the good.
Yeah.
We grow in virtue. We grow in the holy. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's coming back to the rosebud thing. You don't have to trim the rose itself.
Right.
You just need to let it bloom.
In its own time.
In its own time. And there's nothing wrong with a rosebud. It's just not a rose yet. It's
All right, we need to take a step back because we did talk about the sacred a little bit too early.
well,
Okay.
duh. Of course, we're going to jump to the sacred.
I mean, we got a thumbs up earlier, so I don't think we're doing anything wrong.
Well, I haven't seen any recent thumbs up. I'm a bit worried.
We only need one per video, so. You were talking about William James. He was talking about I and I.
Yes.
See, this is where my notes kind of get spacey, so I'm relying a lot on Mark's
Oh,
notes.
yeah, he's
here, too.
actually quoting William James as well in this one.
All right. I have a quote from the episode from Mark's wonderful notes. There's a difference between something being a phenomenological mystery and it being something I cannot theoretically explain. To conflate them is to equivocate between propositional and perspectival knowing. And he says that the example of this is that he can't know what it's like to be dead. It's impossible.
Thank you, Mark, because I didn't get that whole quote.
Yeah. And he was talking about this before in episodes. It's not like so mysterious. And I liked how he was talking about it doesn't make me immortal. This is not proof.
Yes, John, okay.
And then that William James part, he was like talking about how I can never see the I, EYE, or in quote or in parentheses, I, with the letter I as in me. I can only see by means of the I, and in a similar way, I as in me. I can only see through the means of me. Okay.
It's framing problem. It's that little boxes that he drew, like,
Yeah.
you know, this is a frame, but you are the framed. You stay, me keeps being the framed because the I keeps going further away. The one that sees keeps, you can never see the one who sees, type of thing, ultimately. So that's what this is about. John and Chris and Greg have a beautiful series, The Elusive Eye, which is all about this.
Yeah, I remember you were talking about that. That was like during pandemic times, right?
That's the first time I noticed Chris. So, and that's a long time ago.
Yeah. That part, he's really emphasizing the grammar of subject and object doesn't work. You cannot confuse properties of your theories with properties of what your theories are about.
And the examples I thought here is very helpful.
Very, yeah.
When he said, yeah, a theory of light doesn't have to be light, for instance. So it's, yeah. And that's the only one I remember. I didn't actually write
Vague.
it.
Vague was my favorite. He's like, a theory of
Yeah.
vagueness shouldn't be vague. In fact, it should be the exact opposite. Yeah, exactly. Like that's an important thing to conceptualize because all of this stuff that we're learning, it kind of feels like it's arming me for different situations and things that can arise. Like because I am in relationship with this understanding that I cannot confuse the properties of theories with the properties of what the theories are about. It's going to help me with something that I experience in life too. In this kind of way where like maybe I have something that I'm trying to explain. I don't know, but it just feels like it's preparing me to be able to defend or build arguments with or something.
Yes, because what I'm now sensing is you have reluctance. When I say you, I don't mean you, Sarah, I mean a human being, have reluctance. We have reluctance, and this is maybe what he gets to, talking about the mystery.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we can't have a theory about the mystery. Because that is not the same as the mystery. It's not like we're capturing the mystery by talking about the mystery. We don't even have to worry about it because that is not a possibility.
Yeah.
Because it's not the same thing.
On the flip side, it doesn't make it mysterious. These things that we learn about the mystery, they in themselves are not mysterious. It is a mystery that we are exploring, but it doesn't mean that the concepts that build our arguments are mysterious themselves.
Yeah. Which I imagine what he's saying here is, if you do that, it's going to be woohoo.
Yep.
You know, if you try to speak about the mysterious in mysterious ways,
Mm-hmm.
which is maybe what I'm guilty of often, sorry,
Yeah.
then, but it's just because I'm still learning. So
Yeah.
it's not that I'm trying to speak in mysterious ways. I'm stumbling through my words. That's what's
Exactly.
happening.
Yeah. I mean, it is
Um,
still a mystery. So that's the thing. Like,
yeah,
I'm going to speak about it in a mysterious way, but that's not details supporting an argument. It's just like, no, I've got to
yeah,
like mysteriously buzz about this until something
yeah,
does actually like not become a focal point, but somehow features jump out at me. And then I'm like,
yeah,
okay, now I can describe a little bit more of this mystery. And those
yeah,
things are actually like something I could build an
yeah,
argument with.
yeah,
But it doesn't mean, and those arguments will not be mysterious just because they are describing the mystery.
exactly. Yeah. Mystery opens us up to the sacred. To enact religio is to fundamentally enhance our agency, to disclose
What's missing from religio that's found in religion?
the disclosure of the world and our connectedness to it. I did find this also very important for the coven. So that's why I want to mention. And man, I sometimes have it when I listen to John. Like, especially when I was listening to John, I'm not doing it anymore. Maybe I will start again tomorrow. Like, I listen to him every Sunday morning instead of going to church.
Mm.
Now I'm doing the Plato course, so I'm doing that. But I will often, but maybe because of my church association, I would in the middle sometimes, if it's like very something that speaks to me profoundly. I don't want to say it is profound in itself because some things just speaks to different people differently. I would pause and I get up and dance, like because a song would pop up in my head and I would just have to dance. You know, have the whole church experience. Like
Yeah.
if you're a you know that way inclined, and this one, I just here I paused, and then at the end I danced to it again. That dance in the graveyards.
Gloria, like some other name we kept on calling you.
I belong to your mystery, and then it was like, that song just. And so, and I had a mystical experience like dancing to because when I dance often to those songs, I'm dancing with you all.
Mm-hmm.
You are dancing with me, so then there's something happening. So that was pretty cool. And after, but this is maybe for future relevance, hopefully far in the future. After that song, like the next song that came on automatically was Into the West from Lord of the Rings. I'm like, oh my word. Whoever dies first, everyone has to sing this song at their bedside. And then continually until there's just one left. but but then hopefully there will be others who can sing the song at the bedside. I want that song sung at my bedside when I die. Into the West.
Night is falling. You've come to journey's end. Sleep now. Dream of the ones who came before.
And now we're at something central is missing from religio
Okay.
that is in religion.
But I do want to know that transition that we just made there. What brought you to that? The dancing and celebrating and on Sundays listening to John and like you were talking about.
Just because I did it today again, like halfway through the video, I had to stop and dance. When he mentioned mystery, like every time he
Mm-hmm.
mentioned mystery, the song just popped up, and I just had to dance and participate
Aw.
with the mystery instead of
Yeah.
just
But it feels
listening
like
to
you're
about it.
learning a little bit every time you do that too, because you're being at one with it. So
Yeah,
accommodating it,
yeah,
making accommodations. I'm going to stop what I'm doing to dance. All right.
yes.
I like that.
It felt like participation with the mystery, and not
Yeah.
just studying the mystery.
Right. That's what's so amazing about us talking about this practicing, or doing the practicing. That's what we keep talking about is like, if you're actually doing it, you start to understand. If you're not doing it, then I could talk all day about how interacting with this content is going to change your life. And it sounds like such a platitude. It sounds like a 1, 2, 3 step. This is all you got to do. Call 999-444. And, like this is like a total advertisement, but I mean it. Like, if you engage with this work, because it's a mystery, like what is it? What is it? We're awakening from this meaning crisis. Well, what is the meaning crisis? I guess you could pick any mystery. You really could pick any mystery to explore, make it a good one. This is a good one. And doing that has changed our lives. And yeah, now I have people that will sing at my bedside when I die, or maybe, but that's a binding, that's a relating, there's something very special about engaging with this mystery and all of its faces.
When I was at this stage, I guess, a lot of this was like I said in the beginning, I can't remember pre-recorded or recorded. This episode just jumped out at me like, oh my God, this is what the coven is doing.
Yeah.
We're not making the religion that is not a religion. We are being the religion that is not a religion in our own way. And if it's just for the 5 of us, so be it. But it's beautiful. We are participating in a religio with the coven. And I was reminded of the first episode. I think I said John is, and you use a really cool word that I can never say, a cord that binds us. What's the word that's when you go diving?
Literal.
When you go
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you're right, Tether, but it's been so long since I took the diving course. That sounds right though.
Yeah. But anyway, like I said, we are, and then we weren't even doing it as much as we're doing it now with the coven. I said we are dancing over the air on the abyss, and we need John's work to secure us. And when I was doing this episode, I was like, oh my God. Like, I had no idea what I was saying, but it was so true.
Yeah.
Because when you were speaking of the work we were doing, this is one layer. You and me practicing the awakening is one layer. And we would not have understood what we are talking about as well as we didn't if we didn't have the other layers.
Right. That's the thing is like this is more meaningful because we're actually participating in it with a coven. We have a bound religio that we're interacting with. And if I didn't have that, then I'd be like, well, this all sounds great in theory.
Yeah.
But like I actually have a way to participate in not only his content to accommodate that contact, but then also there's an accommodation being made in our group too.
Yeah.
Or Penta.
Everything just feels so perfect. It's almost weird.
It's
right?
Stranger Than Fiction. That was one of my favorite movies growing up. Will Ferrell, he's walking outside and there's this narrator. She's got a British accent. Harold Crick. I love that movie. That's what it feels like. All right. And why did we just go through all that? I wanted to find that because we were just talking about how we're so apprehensive about even approaching the talking about it. There's no grammar for it. We can no longer speak in a subject-object relationship way with it. So that really helps to exemplify some of the ways that quote unquote it, the mystery, is something that you can engage with because we're actually practicing it here right now. We're practicing it in our coven, and anywhere that you transcend yourself, you're probably somehow engaging with a mystery. And that doesn't make it, the argument of it existing, a mystery. There is a mystery to explore. Okay, now we can talk about religio and religion and what's missing from religion that religio has. Or, sorry, what's missing from religio that religion has.
And John claims that it's the sacred. He doesn't want to say the divine because the divine feels too narrow.
Yeah, I think maybe we should then go into that definition of the sacred, since we're avoiding the word the divine, because he's saying, like, is it like God's divine, but the Buddha, like the Tao, their book isn't necessarily divine, but it is definitely sacred. So there's like a distinction being made here. I'm going to read the definition. So I've got
Yes, please. It's Mark's definition. Thank you,
yes,
Mark.
Mark's definition, exactly. I do have it written out here to the side, but I'm going to read from his too. The sacred is a metaphysical proposal grounded in the idea that it is supernatural. And sacredness is a psycho-existential proposal. So there's a metaphysical proposal about the sacred, but then there is a psycho-existential proposal about sacredness. Now, that sacredness is what it is like to experience the sacred. Religio is associated with the latter. So that's where we get that word religio relating to what we're talking about right now, is that it would kind of be identified with sacredness. And so how one would interact with that which we are calling the sacred, a metaphysical proposal grounded in the idea that it is supernatural.
Oh man, it makes the fact that Rebecca's name also mean the same as religio even so much, because I mean, if you want to experience sacredness, call Rebecca. It's
Yeah. So let's just use the analogy. Rebecca is what it's like. That religio is the way in which we are in touch with the sacred. That's very interesting. The binding that we have with the sacred. Now,
I wonder if he's going to get to the sacred. I can't even remember. Because now I'm curious about,
right?
yeah, but who is the sacred? What is the sacred?
Right. He's like, we can't study that, so we're just gonna set that to the side. It's like relevance. The sacred is relevance.
And then it's not such a far jump to say relevance is God or God is relevance if the sacred is relevance. But maybe it is. You know, what is it that makes things shine for us? Because that is relevance. That relevance realization is drawing your attention to something that shines.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes it shines? Glory. Glory is shining. It's so why not? You know, different names, but the same mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Like the song Gloria, by all different names we keep calling you.
Gloria, like some other name we kept on calling you.
That's not the exact words, but it comes down to that. It's different names, but it's the same mystery that we call to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we don't get to hear John's thoughts on the sacred, so we just have to stick with the sacredness. And he says it is a meta meaning function, homing us against horror. I like that. I just used the word homed recently in the chat too, but homing, it's homing us.
Well, I've got the word home written on my wrist, even. And you will too. Can't show it. I can't bend like that.
The wrist don't work that way.
The wrist doesn't work that way. Sorry. I wrote in my little brackets that shows my own thought. What about homing us in horror?
Ooh.
I think you have to risk it. If you interact with the sacred, you have to risk being horrified.
Yeah. Well, he's got, Mark has the description here, horror here meaning to be overwhelmed by loneliness, homesickness, cultural shock, and a tremendous sense of alienation, absurdity, and anxiety. And he's even saying that it helps us to be more resilient in the face of tragedies and horrors of life. So the sacredness helps us to be more resilient in the face of tragedies and horrors in life.
It homes us in horror then.
It does home. Oh, it could. And in fact, I think it has.
Yeah, it does. It's the only thing that could effectively home us in horror, because horror is a reality of existence.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about well, we were talking about St. Bridget's Day, and just mention of Rebecca mentioned that baptism was used inappropriately. I mean, that's horrifying to be waterboarded or whatever, held underwater against your will. That's horrifying. Um, hmm, hmm. And I mean, that does make one more resilient if they survive that, which is disconcerting. I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah.
But let's not do those rituals.
No, let's not. Let's not. But it doesn't, but something about that is interesting how it's not okay, but let's just say, all right, because once that person is emerging from the water, their state isn't, I'm purified, I feel whole, this is wonderful. It's terror. So that is what they are
Yeah.
prepared for. That is what they will
Ah,
see. Now they are going to only, their pattern of
that's
recognition is on horror.
that's a very, very good point. You want to attune people to the good and
Of it.
to
Yeah.
beauty and truth. You don't want to attune them to fear, terror. Yeah.
In a good world, I guess. Because, I mean, I think that that's been used for manipulation of whole populations.
But since we are living the religion that is not a religion, we get to make it as we go along. So
Yay, us. All right, moving on.
we will not waterboard people.
No, absolutely not. I promise. With my whole heart. All right. So he's saying that sacredness has a way of homing us against horror and that it is a necessary feature, but not a sufficient one. And this is when we start talking about Gnosticism. And I imagine you probably have a lot here.
We spoke about this when we spoke of altered stage of consciousness. It's that feeling of losing, and I mean, we know it well, that feeling of losing grip on reality completely. That is this transgressive nature, I have a feeling, of these things.
Okay.
But it's needed sometimes so that you can break the frame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's like we were talking in the last episode about the hourglass and the sand falling, and it's like little avalanche, little avalanche. And I was like, isn't that nice? And you were like, no, sometimes you want it to completely clear out. Sometimes it's good to have that whole thing. That way you're starting with a very solid foundation. It's much wider now because it's just completely fallen apart. It's not just top avalanches happening. And that's the salient landscape shift. It just completely levels out to a whole different base. So there's that.
But that is exactly this thing about this self-organizing criticality, right?
Yep.
You don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if you're gonna fall apart or fall into something more profound and stronger. It's a risk.
It's a risk. We're going to be talking about the Fool too. That's really funny.
Yes, I was thinking exactly. I actually, the place where I want to read something of Jordan Peterson before we talk about On the Fool, and I wrote in there the importance of foolishness and self-transcendence. That connection is really, it's like, yeah, you have to risk being a fool. And that reminded me of me saying, and then when I was saying it, I was like, oh, what the hell am I saying? But saying like, I'm at a point where I don't even care if I'm bullshitting myself. I feel like I have to risk bullshitting myself.
Right.
It's that thing. It's like sometimes you gotta be the fool. Or risk being the fool.
Risk being fooled.
Yeah, risk being fooled.
Yes. You've mentioned auto, and it actually, like, this word, what word was it that was actually meaning numerous? Because it wasn't holy.
Heilige, which is holy.
Oh, okay.
But it's a loaded term, like John points out, the holy. Heilige in my language is holy. That's how I would but glory, when the angels are singing around the throne of God, they they sing holy, holy, holy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also can be translated as glory, glory, glory in that sense.
That's so interesting. Like it's not hitting anything in my brain. Like you making that distinction it's like, oh, okay, cool. I mean, but those are like, because they're just kind of both words that I don't use regularly.
Mhm.
And they're kind of like on their own aside from other words I use. So it's like, cool. I mean, if I can equate those two, that's great. Tell me.
Oh, there's a lot for me in this because it goes with the whole purification thing. Because be holy because the Lord your God is holy. That's the idea, right? That's when you talked about how we should be pure and how the saints are more pure than us. That whole idea. But then what does it mean?
Mm.
And I think we misunderstand it completely. And that's why when he speaks of holy as wholeness, that maybe I relate better to completeness and health.
Yeah.
And he speaks of righteousness, which
Yeah.
we it's a biblical word. But now that I'm reading the Politeia with this with Johannes, the word I forget the Greek word. I should know this, diakonoia or something like that.
Mm.
But it's not that. But can also be translated as righteousness, justice, righteousness. But then the way Plato presents it in the Politeia or the Republic is exactly this what I read, like to everything in its appropriate place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What I read in the beginning, like that is holy. That is the true concept of holy, being holy. And becoming holy in that way to embody the sacred is very different than becoming holy by mortifying your flesh.
Right. Yeah. And I want to draw a distinction because you said that I believe that saints are more holy. And I think that they participate in a way that is more holy. So I think that that's a distinction I want to make because
Okay.
it's relevant here. I think that's
Okay.
exactly what you're saying. Or maybe not, but that's kind of what I want to draw is the distinction of I don't believe that people come to this earth in sainthood, but I think that you can achieve sainthood by your way of participating with the world and engaging with the world. And then once you are gone, you become the saint. So it is actually not you, the person, that was a saint, but you are held in regard as somebody that exemplified sainthood and holiness, but isn't necessarily somebody that was prior to their arrival here on earth holier than me.
And sainthood, what exactly does that mean?
Sainthood is something that you are elevated to once you have passed away, generally, like saints aren't living. And it is someone who has exemplified a life of living by the way of Christ. And so, for instance, there's Saint Bernadette. She was visited by the Virgin Mary, and the way that she lived her life was engaging in the way where she recognized that. And so her, like, she was writing journals, and like her whole life was devoted to these experiences that she was having with Mary. So it her whole life was built around that. I want to be in relationship. I want to see. I want to experience. And it wasn't because I'm Bernadette I got picked to be the saint. She was interested. So it wasn't something that it was an identity that she had in her life. It's something that happens to you once you're gone.
I was also thinking, coming back to the pre-egoic, egoic, and post-egoic. I'm starting to see, though not be yet. I won't ever presume that I am, but see how that which you mentioned is post-egoic in the sense of you're so consumed by the beauty of beauty or the goodness of the good, truth, that you simply don't have eyes for yourself. It's not that you do it on purpose. It's just that, I mean, when you're with your lover, you you know, your attention is so fully on him because you adore him, that
Yeah. I mean, it can. That is a relationship that I was in. I think that that is an obsessive relationship. I think that's a codependent relationship. I think
yeah,
there's a way that you can engage in a relationship where you recognize somebody as amazing and wonderful, and somebody that I adore, but I cannot idolize another partner because that's what I did. And
yeah, but maybe that is exactly what John warns about when he says we shouldn't make romantic, that as an analogy, but not as an example of something good. That's what happens when we make romantic relationships take the place of the
yep,
sacred.
yep,
But by analogy, that could be. But when it is actualized and not only just analogy, it becomes dangerous.
yep.
That's a very good example of why John warns against
Mm-hmm.
doing that,
Mm-hmm.
letting relationships carry the sacred.
Yep.
But for there are moments, if you keep it to moments with your lover and
Mm-hmm.
not like
Right.
my
Yeah.
whole life. But
Right.
that analogy that you're so absorbed by the other,
Yeah.
but then when the other truly is the sacred, you know.
This calls into that question of like how much experience matters to people, like how much the human experience is um meaningful, because there's that, like you're saying, the post-egoic, like or even the Buddha, and like rejecting the body, and yeah, I'm not gonna enjoy things because joy is suffering, and suffering is the root of all evil. And it's like, why do I want to engage with that? So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying Saint Bernadette or any saint, for instance, is living a life that I would want to live. That's the whole thing about sainthood. It is not enviable as far as like you want to live that life. Nobody wants to be a saint, actually. Nobody wants to have to exemplify the patience of a saint, but some people do it. And those people are people that, it's it's just really interesting. It's very interesting. These individuals that are here to expand the collective consciousness into that confronting the sacred. This is how I will confront the sacred. Christ, I'm going to do everything it says. If let this cup pass for me or whatever, like, but I will do that thy will. And so that's kind of the thing that I'm like noticing, is that isn't a hero that anybody would want to. It's not a celebrity, it's not a pop star, it's not a leader that anybody wants to be anything like. It is a archetype that engages with the sacred in a particular way. And you can visit with that by reading the excerpts about that or through that person. And this is why it is cool to, like, I'm going through the saints right now. I'm like a saint a day and just learning about people. It's just an experience. It's just a person that found the sacred so amazing that they were willing to risk the, either persecution, but also like, you're just insane, you're crazy. A lot of people that are considered crazy are just so in touch with the sacred. I think somebody, I can't say it, Ian McGilchrist, said something to the effect of the people that are most crazy are actually the most rational. Because here's an example. He was like, somebody that's schizophrenic, they hear a voice in their head and they think, oh, that outlet over there has a microphone in it. Because the voice in your head isn't very logical to say that there's a voice in my head, but to say that somebody radioed and set up something in my ear, that's actually pretty logical. So he's saying like, this like way that we can engage with the sacred can appear to be completely psychotic, and in those ways where you're refusing your body and not actually feeding yourself. So yeah, lots of different ways to engage with the sacred in religio.
Yeah. Oh, just about that, the lives of saints aren't enviable. Something that people often forget when the prophets talk about the chosen one or the chosen people, they're not chosen to be special. They're chosen to suffer on behalf of humanity. You don't want to be the chosen one.
Nope.
God help you if you are.
Yeah.
On that wonderful note.
On that lovely, uplifting note. That's great.
Oh, we said sadder things. So I have a passage and I have no clue anymore what it is. So I hope it's, although I just decided to read it just before we started recording, but we spoke so much and we were so everywhere that I'm reading from Paulo Costa's A Secular Wonder in the book. Oh my word. I'm sorry.
Oh, I can't wait.
One can go mad trying to bring together what cannot be fought. It is crucial not to lose sight of the instability and the general destabilizing effect of the whole gamut of wonder responses. The startle response is, of course, a bodily destabilizing experience. This is actually its main biological function. And the same can be said of stupefied amazement, with its widely open eyes and mouth, the full and deep inspiration, the uplifting of hands, and so forth. Wonder cannot, maybe should not, last for long. And this should say something about the human condition. But what?